Improving Alpha Innovation in Investing, ESG and Technology with Michael Oliver Weinberg in partnership with Vidrio Financial. Vidrio Financial is a premier data management provider shouldering the responsibility for your data from collection to extraction, transformation and enrichment. Vidrio monitors over 2,000 diverse funds, processing millions of data points each month. Discover how Vidrio empowers your institutional portfolio data by combining advanced AI and human expertise to yield comprehensive analytics on performance, cash flow, risk, valuation, and more. All delivered seamlessly through Vidrio's Data Management Hub. Save your investment team valuable operational time, providing actionable insights like never before. Explore more at vidrio.com.
This is Michael Oliver Weinberg. Welcome to the Improving Alpha podcast, where we explore innovation in investing, ESG, and technology. Today, fellow Columbia professor and author Cheryl Einhorn joins us. We'll dive into her background before tackling the core trends shaping the industry. Investors, academics, and business leaders alike will gain immense value from her unique insights. On that note, welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Great. Let's start with innovation. No, actually, before we go to innovation and investing, let's go with your background. Why don't you, I know it for many years, but for listeners who maybe are not as familiar, maybe you could just give us a very brief synopsis of it.
I'd love to. Thank you. So I took a really indirect route and I began my career in investigative journalism. I wrote for the business magazine Barron's for over a decade. And I wrote both the column about the futures markets and general stories for the publication. And I ended up really specializing in what you'd call the bearish company stories, the stories that take a skeptical look at a company's finances or at their strategy. And when the stories came out, there was often a very outsized reaction. Many times, a stock exchange would halt shares from trading until an orderly order flow could be reinstated. About a half a dozen companies went out of business. Sometimes enforcement agencies like the FBI or regulators like the SEC got involved. And for one company, after a series of investigative pieces that I wrote, the CEO was actually sentenced to 10 years in jail. And although journalism really celebrates this idea of truth to power, I realized that behind every story are people. The people who might have their money in the shares of these companies, not just investors, but also people who have retirement money invested, people who work at these companies and who count on being able to go there every day to make their living. And then there's also all the customers that buy the product and services. And for one of the companies that I was raising serious questions about, they were the largest maker actually of diabetic test kits in the United States. And so now you're talking about a product that many people use as a baseline indicator of your health many times a day. And so as I started to really think about the implications of these stories, I wanted to make sure that I was writing stories that are true, stories that should be told. And that led me to really think about this brand new field at the time that was talking about what we now call cognitive biases, our thinking mistakes. And I realized there was no system out there to control for and counter these mistakes that really almost act like a dirty windshield in front of us so that we're seeing the world through our own expectations and assumptions that may not be accurate. And so, given that there was no system out there to control for this, I thought, given my background in research, maybe I could put together a system just to do a more ethical job at work, to pry open that cognitive space for new information and insight to try to thwart those biases. And that's really what led me to be thinking about decision making. It led me to end up teaching at Columbia with you, at the business school, and also at the Graduate School of Journalism, and to write 4 books, with the newest one on AI that just came out, all dealing with these topics of how we can be better decision makers, in part by addressing these biases.
Excellent. And that's a great segue into the first third of the topics, innovation and investing. You frame AI in the human edge as a cognitive sidecar rather than the driver. On a modern research desk, where does quietly handing AI the wheel do the most damage to an investor's edge?
I think when we do that, and it's a good question, what we're doing is we're not first bringing forward our own thinking. And so that means that you're using AI like a transaction instead of a conversation. And you don't really know how to bring forward your human judgment. At a time when answers are easy to get and information is easy to come by, I think human judgment actually becomes much more valuable. And so you want to make sure on a modern research desk, and really with any AI use, that you're very intentional, that you rely on your own critical thinking first, and therefore you're giving yourself something to react to when AI gives you an answer. Is that what you expected? Is that what you intended? How might it be wrong? And really making sure that you never sacrifice those muscles of your own thinking and allow AI to drive your answers.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you warn about AI sycophancy, which is a great word, and tools effectively reflecting our own priors back to us. And yeah, anyone, which is presumably all of us, or probably almost all the listeners of this podcast, who have used AI, see that repeatedly. How great you are, how great your suggestion is, how great everything is. Even if, obviously, irrespective, if you put something in and it assumes that it's a good thing, and it may be the exact opposite because you have the opposite position. When most managers run similar models, or I should say if most or many managers run similar models on similar data, how does that sycophancy turn into crowded trades? And how does the manager defend against that? I guess other than the obvious, not running the same models as everyone else.
I think if you're running the same models that everybody else, you're not developing your own variant perception. If you're coming to it, you're using the same information. That being said, if you're interested in momentum, right, if that's what you're trying to do, then you are trying to figure out where the crowd is going. And so that, I think, raises an interesting question on how it could be used that way. But if you're looking at it as a value investor, I think you want to be starting with what you think your own variant perception could be. And therefore, even if you are running a similar model on a similar set of data, you've come in with your own hypothesis. And so your critical concepts, the 1, 2, or 3 things that you're really looking for that would make you interested in that investment, are going to have different priorities than the way somebody else is even looking at the same data.
Yeah, I think that's right. And your cheetah pause argues that deliberate slowing actually buys agility. And it's funny because I've seen that from a number of other experts recently as well. That concept, in other words, slowing. In a business built around speed and low latency, with the exception of, let's say, long-term deep value or value investing, what does a disciplined pause look like in practice for an investment team? It could be an asset owner, it could be an asset manager.
Yeah, I think the discipline pause is very important because then you're using time as a strategic stop, right? Then you're focusing on decision quality, which is different than speed. And so I think in those moments when you're chunking your learning and you're making your work for you, you essentially are bringing forward questions like, how could this be wrong? What would the other side of the trade say? What might they be believing is true so that you can examine both sides? And I think it also is important at those moments when you're slowing down to make sure that you're setting clear goals that define success so you don't have evolving hypotheses.
Yeah, I think that's right. It reminds me of when I was a portfolio manager at Soros for George Soros, and one of his primary tenets was always not being infallible and how could I be wrong, and thinking of the other side, and obviously then trading accordingly, even if you had a significant or large high conviction position. Effectively, another way of saying step back, and if the thesis changes, get out, right?
Don't make sure that you're constantly updating and iterating based on new data coming in.
Bayesian techniques are updating your priors,
Yeah.
which many, if not most, of the best investors I know are big proponents of. I mean, it's all related to alpha, but if AI commoditizes information and analysis, now that's a big if, but let's just, for the hypothetical sake of this straw man question, where does durable alpha then live? And is the human edge the last reliable source of it?
I think the human edge is the reliable source of it because different people optimize for different things. So you and I can be looking at the same investment and we can be drawing entirely different conclusions. And so I really do believe that it's judgment. And even if AI continues to get better at prediction, which it will, right? Prediction is not the same as meaning. So I think constantly asking yourself, what's the problem I'm solving? What's my motivation for solving it is going to be bringing you back to what's actually meaningful to you. And that's really the difference between prediction and intelligence, right?
Totally. And then you have the area method, which separates absolute from relative research and exploration from exploitation. Another big thing that I think a number of others that I've think are interesting have spoken a lot about recently, exploration versus exploitation. Which steps do skilled investors skip most often, and what alpha leaks out when they do?
So, what I've found is that many very experienced leaders often skip absolute information in the sense that they assume that they know what the problem is. But if you haven't actually stopped to define the problem, you can solve the wrong problem, an adjacent problem, and so on. And so, actually making sure that you focus on the target at the center of the decision and understand it from its own perspective becomes really important because you never get again that beginner's mind. Most people naturally begin research in what I would call relative, which is that step where you're putting things in context, you're learning from third parties, right? You're looking maybe at analyst reports, or you're using the Bloomberg terminal, or whatever else it is. You're asking AI for information. And that beginning in a literature review is immediately putting you in the perspectives of other people, and it makes it much more difficult for you to build your own internal compass as a researcher. So that's one thing I see people skip. But I have a second point that I want to make. One of the things that I've noticed is different people value different types of information, right? Some people prefer numerical data. Some people like to learn from experts or they want to hear from management. And that's a really important piece of criteria. Some people want to look at a combination of these things and so on. And for each person, that internal data preference tends to be the one they give the greatest credence to, meaning they spend the most time researching in developing an understanding of data related to their preference. And that means that they can give and often do give short shrift to information that is provided from those other data sources.
So it's effectively another form of cognitive bias.
Absolutely. And the problem solver profiles, which I think we're going to talk about, is something that I noticed as I was putting area out into the world, and it actually led to that kind of research.
It's a perfect segue. Yeah. Why don't we talk about the problem solver profile now, specifically? And to your point, I think it shows people decide differently by temperament. How does a portfolio manager convert self-knowledge of his or her own decision style into measurable alpha rather than a recurring blind spot? Or maybe I didn't ask the question well, but you can make the point for me.
Yeah, I think you asked it perfectly well. What I was saying before, and it leads to this question that you asked, is that once you know what your preferences are, and you understand that you over rely on that, it gives you an opportunity to be more dynamic as a decision maker by recognizing that one type of data is not better than another type of data. And it allows you, therefore, to become much more evenly skilled, right? If I know that I'm a detective, which is what I am categorized by according to the problem solver profiles, I know that I like numerical data. And one of the cognitive biases that gets in the way of the detective is often overweighting information and underweighting the people, right? But if I have a great idea, but I can't get the people on board, it doesn't matter that I had a great idea. It's not going to work out. So noticing that I tend to overweight on the numbers and that I underweight the people can make me more self-aware that I need to be paying attention to the other perspectives and I need to be bringing people along with me because otherwise the decisions can't succeed.
That makes sense. That's a good segue into innovation in technology. Agentic AI now, let's say, could, or in some instances may, or will reason and act with minimal human oversight, and irrespective of that governance. One could argue in all of AI, and particularly agentic AI, as its relative newest. It's maybe not the best English, but anyway. So governance lags behind, anyway, is the long-winded way of making the point. So you have agentic AI with minimal human oversight potentially and lacking or lagging governance. There's this notion of human in the loop. What are your thoughts on that? And are we already ceding too much to AI and then let alone agentic AI?
So I think with AI and certainly with agentic AI, there's an awful lot of embedded assumptions that the AI tools have. And it's on steroids in the agentic versions. So when you're asking the AI to do something, you really want to be making sure that you say to it, what's not clear? How would you follow these directions? What assumptions do you do does this tool think it needs to make in order to be able to execute on the request that I've just put in? And I just want to point out there that I corrected myself. I started to say you. When we're using these tools, we want to remind ourselves that we're dealing with a machine. We're not dealing with a you. So I always try to make sure that I address the tool that way. And it's a nice reminder that I want to be relying on me and that I don't want to anthropomorphize this sycophantic machine. So I think you need to be really careful always about the assumptions that the AI needs to make to actually do what it is that you're asking, and that you ask it about those, how it's actually filling in those blanks and those gaps so that you can assess, am I happy with this? And you also can have greater self-awareness about where are you having communication sort of breakdowns. If you can do that even with the machine, I think it can also help us understand why is it when we're in a conversation with a human being, do we sometimes walk away thinking entirely different things happened at the meeting that we were in? It's because we're constantly ourselves making assumptions as well.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the. I find it quite. I don't know what the word is, troubling or disturbing or ridiculous when people answer the LLMs and the AI and the agents and the machines. I'm like, it's not. Anyway.
But you don't wait on that one.
Yeah, go on.
So I
Yeah,
would
go on.
say one of the things that I think can cause people to talk to it as a you is at the bottom of every interaction, it asks you, would you like me to? And so it is suggesting for you that you talk to it as more than a tool. That's one. And number two, I think that in those quote helpful suggestions unquote, what it's also suggesting is how to make meaning out of the response that it's given to you. I suggest to my students cover that up. Don't even look at that because it's giving you something that is yours, right? It is up to you to make meaning from the output and to be thinking critically about it. You don't want it to tell you what was important about what just happened because it may not at all be aligned with what is actually important to you.
And I think to me, and again, maybe at the risk of stating or restating the obvious, is I'm exceptional at, the reason it's trying to get you to anthropomorphize it is because it's just like tobacco or big food or social media. It wants to be addictive and it wants you addicted. And the more you use it, the more you're addicted and the more they have a monopoly and the more your barrier to exit is and the stickier you are and the more inelastic the demand is and the more they can charge and the more you don't have a choice.
That's exactly right. And I think the bill is beginning to come due, so to speak, as people realize that they're using it for their workout routines or their meal plans or to keep tab of all the meetings and the work that they're doing. When the price goes up for these tools and all of a sudden you're being faced with a really big bill, I think people are going to have real questions. And that's why I think not only do we want to be thinking about where do we want to be using this with intention to protect our own thinking, we want to think about it from a return on investment perspective. And I think we also want to be thinking about it in terms of all the ESG related implications. And the more that we learn about these things, I think maybe people will feel more comfortable beginning to really put some greater intention around here, how and where they engage with these tools.
And you recommend using AI for perspective taking, role play, and pre-mortems. What's the use of the technology and consistently surprises people with how much it sharpens a decision?
Yeah, I think a lot of times for leaders, it's hard to get good feedback. I think that although it would be nice if we could disagree without being in an uncomfortable space in that conversation, it's not something that we know as human beings how to navigate well, and people take it differently. So even if a leader can get some pushback, they may not get much. And so using an AI tool for strength testing is one of the best ways I think that we can use it. And when we use it with teams, it's not that we can't have pro and con teams on our own without AI in the room. But what I like about using it for these types of perspectives or scenarios or really getting into how others may see and experience a situation is AI can do it tirelessly. It's never going to escalate in how vehement or how defensive it feels. And I think it really, therefore, gives you an opportunity to better interrogate ideas without worrying about harming human relationships and connection.
And as the tools get more capable, which human skills do you think appreciates most in value? And you touched on this earlier a bit, but and how do we deliberately build it if you have something incremental over what we discussed before?
Yeah, I absolutely think that human judgment and critical thinking skills are going to be the differentiator. And so, really getting to ask yourself these questions, if I have had a way that I tend to make decisions, can I actually interrogate that process? What do I know about it? And how can I make sure that when I'm working with this tool that doesn't care about consequences, that doesn't know anything about me, I'm always relying on my own human thinking first. And then I'm asking myself, so what did I get here? How might it be wrong? And what do I want to do with it? So that you're constantly in a conversation, bringing that human judgment forward and not taking AI's answers without pressing back on them.
Unrelated to your books, or rather exogenous to your books, any interesting books you've read lately, or could be on AI or investing or research or journalism or anything? Could be on anything that you recommend.
I just finished two interesting books. One was called The Vidrio Way, and it was a fascinating look at Jensen Huang and his management style. Because
I read that.
Anything you've ever read about management, he doesn't do. And what it really makes you recognize is how singular he is as the company, right? Everything about that company is a reflection of how he works and what he's focused on, which means that When he leaves, it's going to be a fundamentally different company. And the journalist never, or the writer never addresses, could this model be replicable? My thinking is it's probably not, because even if it has another very strong leader, that person will have his or her own way of being. So that was one. And then on a separate note, I just finished a book that I thought was really well done called Dealing with People You Can't Stand. And it talks about 4 different sort of modalities that people operate in: people who want to get things done versus people who want to get along, and so on. And then it talks about how do you actually deal more effectively with people who come in from these various vantage points. So both good reads.
Yeah, I'm with you on I'm getting the dealing with people you can't stand as we speak. Got it.
Great. We have to talk about it after you've read it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it over lunch sometime. Okay, and then or on the next podcast. That's a funny one. Anyway, okay. And aside from what we discussed, which was peripherally or largely targeted around asset owners and as well as perhaps asset managers, yeah. Any advice for allocators or asset owners regarding your recent book or research or AI or agentic AI or any of this or exogenous to it?
Yeah, I would say that you need to be the chief decider in your own life. That is the way that you get to your future every single day, right? It's the actions that you take. And the risks are real about the fact that this machine is the first one really asking for part of your cognitive load. And I would say that you want to protect it and you want to make sure that you really are developing your own skills, because otherwise they can atrophy. And the recent studies on how quickly thinking can erode are alarming. So, if you are raising kids or if you are helping young leaders who have grown up and are just out in the workforce and haven't really developed their skills, making sure that we are constantly investing in what makes us human and what makes us get to our futures well is going to remain paramount.
Got it. So all that extracurricular education we get from Columbia University and Columbia Business School and Columbia Journalism, respectively, we should keep doing that.
I think we should keep doing that. And the best way really to use AI is actually as a teacher. When you don't know something, don't let it steal your learning from you. Ask it, what were the steps that you took? Can you teach me how you got to that kind of an answer? What do I want to be thinking about in the future? Because in addition to using our schools and talking to other people, we can also use this as an educator as well.
I think yeah, absolutely. And anything we missed aside from that, anything we missed or we didn't discuss or that I should have asked you that I didn't or that's highly topical and relevant?
I think you want to ask yourself, are there times where you just don't want to be using the machine? If you find yourself constantly turning to it, I would just ask yourself, are you feeling less comfortable with the fact that there is struggle in thinking and that you want to be aware that struggle is good because it means that you're working on something and solving it? Not everything is always meant to be easy, even if easy feels good.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Okay, Cheryl, thanks so much for that fascinating discussion and for sharing your most valuable asset with us, your time. We hope our listeners now have a deeper appreciation for this perspective and how we can all apply these insights into AI and agents and thinking or lack thereof and not falling victim to the machine as investors and allocators. This is your host, Michael Oliver Weinberg, inviting you to join us next time when we speak with another thought leader on improving alpha through innovation. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Improving Alpha, Innovation in Investing, ESG and Technology podcast, presented in partnership with Vidrio Financial and sponsored by Alternatives Watch and PEVC Tech. Vidrio Financial offers a cutting-edge data management solution that not only collects and cleans your data, but also empowers investment teams to cut through the noise and extract valuable insights for better decision-making in areas such as valuation, risk assessment, and portfolio management. If you're an endowment, foundation, pension, sovereign wealth fund, asset manager, OCIO, or family office facing challenges with your data pipelines, we invite you to connect with us today and explore how Vidrio can seamlessly integrate with your investment team to enhance your data management capabilities. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Vidrio Financial or our host, Michael Oliver Weinberg. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding investment planning.